Okay, so any one of you have done that homework that I gave of double linear regression? How to apply chain rule and apply the two-layer linear regression? Anybody has done it? You have to practice, guys. So otherwise, this is not. This is you'll keep on forgetting. This is only theory is not going to help. So you have to practice. So after this class, next class is on Saturday. So I'll give some tasks this class also. So add that task with this task and by next Saturday complete. Okay. Okay, you guys can see my screen.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So what's next? Okay. So now we will slowly get into PyTorch. Okay. Till now we did everything in NumPy, and slowly we will get inside PyTorch. Okay. I already shown you this diagram, right? Y is equal to b plus wx plus epsilon, right? So here, this is a simplest neural network where x is an input, w is the weight of the edge, b is the base value, that is the average value, and they have not added epsilon. If epsilon is added, then we will add here one more point here. This will give you y. Okay, so this is the simplest possible neural network, which is also called the linear regression model, right? Now, can anybody tell me why is this called a linear regression model? Why is it called linear in nature and not non-linear in nature?
We are using one feature. That's why.
Vivek, your voice is breaking. I cannot properly hear it.
Because of one feature we are using, that's why linear.
No. It is not linear because there is no activation function. So it is written here. Okay. So that is the important part. Activation, if there was an activation function, then what will happen? That function will be applied on this linear combination. Okay. That function can be like cos h, tan h, or sin h, or anything, softmax. So this green circle is a linear combination, right? Everything is having a degree of 1 here. X also 1, W also 1, and B also 1. So it's a linear combination. It's a straight line. And the result of that straight line is not fed to any nonlinear function, nonlinear activation function. Okay. So that means this is my linear combination here. This is the input X coming. This is the base value B, and this is the error value epsilon. The input X has a weight of edge W1 here, W here, sorry. And this is a linear, here what is happening? Linear combination is happening. What is that? B plus W X plus epsilon, right? This is the linear combination, B plus Wx plus epsilon. And that is straight away equal to y. But if I applied a function f over here and took this value as input, then y will not be any more linear, provided f is not a nonlinear function. If x is another linear function, then this is still linear in nature. But if f is a nonlinear function like a log or a square or a or a sine, cos, tan, this type of function, then what will happen? This one will not be any more linear in nature. This will become non-linear in nature. Okay. So this is very important to understand that simple linear regression is also can be depicted by the simplest neural network possible with one input, one output, and no activation function. And since it has no activation function, that is called linear in nature. Okay. So we already saw this part, data generation, generated data, and how they're dividing the data into two parts. This is the training data. This is the training data. This is the validation data. Okay. 80%, 20%. You also saw gradient descent. We started with the random initialization of B and W, and then we calculated the value of y hat, and then calculate the error, then loss, and then from the loss we computed the gradients, B gradient, W gradient, and then we updated the parameters for using gradient descent. So this one you already know. Okay. Here the catch is that the B and W, the X parameter that we have initialized initially, this one, X parameter here, this is not regularized. This is not standardized. Okay. So this data is not standardized in nature, and hence for that reason, what will happen is that the gradient will explode. Okay, the gradient will explode, and we'll see a exploding gradient problem that already Divi and Vivek saw in their code. To solve that, we have to do a standard scalar on that. As I said, that how to make your data having a standard mean of 0 and standard deviation of 1. After doing that, if you solve your this equation, this program, then you get proper gradients and it does not explode. Okay, so that is what you have to do. Now epochs, after this epoch definition also, we said that a epoch is complete whenever every point in a training set has already been used in all steps: forward pass, computing loss, computing gradients, and updating parameters. Okay, so there are 4 steps. First is forward pass, that is calculation of y is equal to mx plus c. Then computing loss, that is y hat minus expected value. Computing gradients, that is the b grad and w grad. And then updating parameters, that is b is equal to b minus learning rate into b grad. That one is the updating parameters. So these are the 4 steps. So all the data points should be in the training set. Okay, the training set data point is xtrain. So all the training data set, when it is used to update these parameters using these 4 steps, then only we say that one epoch is completed. Otherwise, we don't say that an epoch is completed. Okay, and from there onwards, it is clear that for a batch gradient descent, where we are using all the data points at a single epoch only. One epoch means one update. Stochastic gradient means one epoch is n update, because we are only using one element per gradient descent. Mini batch is n epochs is n by 2 updates. Okay, similarly, this is done. Linear regression in NumPy, and so we saw this one. This one was simple. This is the same thing. The program is here. Okay, and if you run this program in Matplotlib, then you see that ultimately we'll get the best fit line like this, with the b value of this much, w value of this much. So we started with a random value of b and w. Then using partial differentiation rule, we gradually adjusted the value of B and W so that this line's MSE loss is the minimum. And that is how we made the best fit line. Okay, so this is what has happened now. Okay. So now it has written here that to make sure that we have not done any mistakes in our code, we can directly use scikit-learn's linear regression and fit the model and compare the coefficients, right? So here B and W are the coefficients, the learnable parameters, right? So according to the data given here, we calculated the B and W manually using NumPy, and we saw the best fit line. You can also straight away use the library of scikit-learn. Okay, this one you already know. We have been using this for a long time. So you can do a fit on this, and you can check the intercept and the coefficient, and you can see that this is matching with this value or not. Okay, there will be little here and there, but it is it will mostly be the same. So you can this way verify that your code is correct or not. Okay, now it's the time to PyTorch. So PyTorch is why PyTorch? Before going into using PyTorch, first you have to understand why we have to use PyTorch. Why not any other programming library, deep learning library like Keras or TensorFlow or anything else, or Luma? So many things are there, right? So why PyTorch? So there are two main reasons for that. One is PyTorch is very Pythonic in nature. Pythonic in nature means the programs or the statements written in PyTorch is very much similar to code written in Python, plain Python. So the learning curve for the developer is not very different. It is very simple. Okay, you will get to learn the things very quickly because it is very much Pythonic way, and you are accustomed of writing like that code. So you can straight away write for loops on it. You can do a slicing on that. You can do list comprehension, dictionaries. All of this you can do on PyTorch objects straight away like you do in Python objects. So that is one big benefit. And second benefit is the community. So as you all know, we have been chasing research papers for a long time now. Most of the research papers are coded in the community are in PyTorch. Okay, and that is where we will reap the most benefit out of it. Okay, because yeah, we will ultimately reach to the position where we are independently writing code from scratch using PyTorch. But to reach that position, we need some help, some hand-holding. To get that hand-holding, we need to have access some PyTorch code written by somebody else and understand how they have written it, why they have written it. So that ecosystem is very strong in PyTorch rather than in TensorFlow or Keras. Okay, I'm not saying that TensorFlow Keras is not at all there. There is also a good community for TensorFlow and Keras, but PyTorch is more, is maximum. So that's why we have an inclination towards PyTorch, right? So this is the reason PyTorch is important. Okay. Okay. Now let's talk about Tensor. I'm straight away diving into the topic. No more beating around the bush. So tensor is nothing but a higher dimensional matrix. Okay, a tensor is a higher dimensional matrix. We all know what is a scalar. It is a single value. We all know what is a vector. It is a list of single values. We all know matrix, two-dimensional values, and anything more than a matrix is called a tensor. So it can be 3D tensor, 4D tensor, 5D tensor, whatever. So you have a tensor. We call it by the name tensor. So technically, matrix is also a tensor, vector is also a tensor, and scalar is also a tensor. So 1D tensor, 2D tensor, 3D tensor, and 4D tensor. But they have special names as well, scalar, vector, matrix. Okay. So that's why this is a tensor. Okay. Okay. Now I'll show you some code here. Okay. So so these are some of the straight away we will go one by one and we will see what is this output of this one. Okay, so simple. Let's start. Okay, before that you have created the project VENV, right? And this has no libraries in it yet. So we need to add torch library. Okay, we need to torch viz. I will say you later. Torch library we need to add. NumPy so already we have added. So this you can add torch the latest version. Okay, so it is just how to add. So if you go to like install torch, so you can straight away install it here in CUDA capable devices. So you go to this location, select the PyTorch version for Windows, for Linux, or for what. If you want to do it for pip, because we are not using Conda. So you want to take for pip and whatever CUDA version you have, suppose 11.3, and this is the command. You have to copy this command and you have to run in your environment. Okay, the virtual environment that you have created, in that virtual environment you have to run this command. Once you run this command, then that virtual environment gets all the libraries for PyTorch. Okay, so depending upon whether you are in Mac, Linux, Windows, whether you're using Conda or pip, you will be using pip because we are following that procedure. Whether we are obviously using Python, not Java. And CUDA version for you doesn't matter because in your laptop there will be, I think in MacBook there will be a GPU, but others there won't be. So you have to select CPU in that case. So if you select CPU, then you have to do this command. If you do GPU, then you have to select this command. Okay, and you have to install it. It will take little time. Around 2 GB, I think it will download. After it has downloaded 2 GB, then these are the basic first programs to understand what is it, how to code in PyTorch. Okay, to get acquainted with certain things. Okay, so let's get started with this. Okay, so there is a function directly, it will give you the number of the CUDA device number. Now current the CUDA device number in my system, which is 0. So device 0. 0 does not mean that there is no CUDA device. It means that the device number is 0. So there is a device and its number is 0. Okay, then we are printing the device. Okay, the n I got here, I am putting it here and I'm printing the device. It is a PyTorch CUDA device class. I'm getting count. I am getting here 1. I have a CUDA device, single CUDA device. I'm getting the device name. It is a NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060 Super. Okay, depending on your laptop or desktop or server, what you have, you will get your device. And then is CUDA available? True. So these are the commands basically you will use in the beginning of your code to make sure that there is a CUDA device and what is the device name, what is the device number, and how many CUDA devices are there. So this is very important because you can very smartly code your modules then. What do I mean by smartly code the modules? So imagine you have two or more CUDA devices in your system. Okay. So, and you want to do parallel processing. So you can divide the data into batches, send one batch to one CUDA device, send another batch to another CUDA device, process them in parallel, and get the results in parallel. Okay. So if you don't know how many CUDA devices are there, or what are the names of, or what are the numbers of those CUDA devices, it will not be possible for you to do that, right? So you have to first know what all CUDA devices you have, what are their names, what is their numbers, and accordingly, I will tell you the code in which you can send the data to the CUDA device and then compute all the things there. Okay. Now let's talk about PyTorch scalar. So PyTorch scalar is very simple. Torch.tensor. As I said, everything is a tensor. Even a scalar is also a tensor. It is a one-dimensional tensor, but it has a special name. That's why it's called a scalar. Okay. So 25 is a scalar here. Okay. And I initialized 25. And if you see now XPT, it is called tensor 25. Okay. So when it was simple Python, then you would have written x underscore pt is equal to 25, right? Now you are writing just x underscore pt is equal to torch.tensor 25. That is the difference. Okay. If you print it, you see here tensor 25. Okay. It has a shape. The shape is empty because it is a scalar. Okay. So shape object is there. Shape property is there, even if it is a scalar. Second, we go for a vector. For a vector, it is similarly, you can generate a vector tensor from a list. Okay, I generated it. I printed it here. You can just like Python objects, you can use indexing to access the tensor objects within the vector. You can see with zero indexing, I got 25 here. Then I'll get the length of the vector, length of the type torch tensor, it is 3. What is the type I will print? If I print, it is called class torch tensor. What is the shape? It is shape is 3, right? So 3 is the shape. Length, it is a vector, right? So no two-dimensional shape. So it's one-dimensional shape. And if I print the transpose, it is the same here. Okay, this is clearly, this is one surprise that I got a tensor. I printed the transpose of this tensor. I was expecting a column matrix. But I got a vector of same dimension, which is not what I expected. Okay, but who can say why this happened? Even I am printing a transpose of the, I hope transpose, you guys know transpose is just converting the rows to column and column to rows. So I had a vector here. I did its transpose, but it did not change anything. So why is that? Any idea? You guys are there or you slept?
No, we are there.
Okay. So it is because the reason is that I declared the tensor as a one-dimensional vector with shape of, you see here, I have a single dimensional shape. Okay. So this shape does not contain row and column separately. It is a single number. It is just telling 3. It is not telling 3,1 or 3,4 or something like that. So when there is no comma, there is no row and column separated. So if there is no row and column separated by concept, then transpose is same as the original. That's why it's the same. But here is a difference. Here is I am declaring the same torch tensor vector, but I am using two brackets. You see here, two brackets here, two brackets here. Now, if I print this tensor, okay, this transpose is like this. Why? If you print the shape, it was 1, 3. So it has one row and three columns. One row and three columns. That is why when I did a dot T transpose, it became 3 row and 1 column. So shape of the transpose is 3 row and 1 column. Okay, so here it is possible because the size is not a single value. It is a tuple, or it is a list of values containing the row and the number of rows and number of columns. And when there are two things, rows and columns, only then transpose will act on it. Otherwise, it will not act, right? So that is why is the reason. Okay. Now we'll come to some norms. Norms is nothing to be scared of. So it is a very simple thing. So norm is vector distance. Okay. So it is like this is one norm. So if I consider this is the vector at this point, then this is A, this is B, this is C, and this distance D is called the norm of the vector. Okay, this is the Euclidean norm. There are many types of norms. This is one norm. Okay, so this norm is take the x coordinate, square it, take the y coordinate, square it, take the z coordinate, square it, root over all of them. Okay, so this is the L2 norm, and this is the most common norm that is being calculated throughout machine learning. Now, you may ask me, what is the use of norm? Where is it used? Norm is used in most of the linear algebra problems and calculus problems. So whenever we will be designing a model, whenever we will be writing our own loss function, all those things when we will be doing, then the paper on which you will be studying about the particular neural network model, they will talk in the language of this L2 norm, L1 norm. So if you don't know what is a norm, then you will be confused. So that is why we are studying norm. So this norm is nothing but all the three components here, because this YPT1 tensor has three components. If it was a 4-vector tensor, then 4 components. 5-vector tensor, then 5 components. So square all the components, add them up, and take their root over. So that is the L2 norm. So here L2 norm is 25.5734. And we can straight away find this one using NumPy's linear algebra library. Okay, which is, you see here the beauty. You are using NumPy's linear algebra library to calculate the norm of a tensor, PyTorch tensor, right? So these two are compatible with each other. So this is the benefit of using PyTorch. But you cannot use TensorFlow tensors directly like this. They will throw error. You have to do some conversions, and then only you can use it. But here I can use a NumPy's function directly on a PyTorch vector or PyTorch tensor. So if you see, this is also the same value, almost 25.57. But did you mark here one thing? This, when I printed this one, it gave me the output as a tensor. But when I printed this one, it gave me the output as just a number. Why? Can anybody tell why this happened?
Because NumPy does not return tensor.
NumPy does not return tensor. So NumPy converts the data first into NumPy, calculates the norm and returns the norm as a scalar value only. Okay. Similarly, the L2 norm of so YPT1 is remember single bracket 2552 2525 and YPT2 was double bracket 2525. So if you check the L2 norm, so L2 norm for that also is the same. So that means norm wise, geographical distance wise or Euclidean distance wise, if my tensor is a single bracket 1 vector or double bracket vector, does not matter. The norm is the same. Okay, the norm is the same. Now let's go to L1 norm. L1 norm is take the absolute value of each component and add them. Right? This is the L1 norm. Okay. So that is equal to 32. Okay. So here what will happen? So 25 is the absolute value, 2 is the absolute value, 5 is the absolute value. Add all of them, you get 32. Okay. So here we didn't have to square them or take a root over. We just took the absolute value and added it. One thing you remember, if in any research paper or anywhere where you are studying the math, it is not mentioned that L2, if it is only said as norm, the norm of the vector is this, then you have to assume that it is talking about L2 norm. Okay, so L2 norm is by default norm. Okay, so that means if they are not mentioning the norm name, then it is L2 norm by default. Otherwise, they will mention the name, whether it is L1 or squared L1 or L2. So this is squared L2 norm, which is same as L2 norm, just the root over is not taken. Okay, so it is little bigger value, that's why. And then max norm. Max norm is take the absolute of all and then take the max of that one. So here it will be 25. 25. Okay, so this is the norm of the vectors. We got it. So how many norms we studied? L1, L2, L1, squared L2, max norm. So these are the 4 types of norms we studied. Okay. Now we are talking about PyTorch matrix. Okay, that is 2-dimensional tensor. We initialized a 2-dimensional tensor like this. This is 2 values, 2 values, 2 values. Okay. Now we'll print this. This is a tensor of 2 dimension. What is the shape? 3 rows, 2 columns. What is the transpose? Obviously, the rows becomes the columns, the columns becomes the rows. And here you see the beauty of it. Just like NumPy, I can slice. I can slice the vector, that matrix, and get only the column 1. Okay, you see, I got only the column 1. Sorry, row 1. So 526. Okay, 526. I sliced and took out this one. So I gave the index of the row, and in column I gave all. So that means return the first row for all columns, and it gave me the output 526. So similarly, if I do it for the transposed matrix, what will be the output here? Can anybody say? What will be our output of this one? If I do a slice of the transpose matrix,
226.7.
226.7. Okay, I am doing the slice of the first row and all the columns. So this one, this is the 0th row, this is the first row and all the columns. Others, you guys are understanding, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, now we will go to higher rank torch. Now how to define it? How to higher rank tensors. So how to define a higher rank tensor? Easiest way is that if you remember in NumPy there was a function np.zeros, right? It creates a empty NumPy array of a particular shape, fills it up with all zeros, right? It works as a buffer, a data structure of that array type. Similarly, torch also has a function, torch.zeros. Okay, so this is a tensor of 32 by 828 by 28 by 3 shape and size, and it is a tensor. Okay, so if you see this, it looks like this one. Okay, so this is very commonly used type of shape. Who can say which type of shape belongs to this? When we read images, this comes as this structure, right? So convolution neural networks and all these. So we have 3 channels, and then we have the XYZ coordinates, and accordingly we have the tensors, right? So this type of shape and size mostly comes with convolutional neural networks for images. Okay, so this is an example of how you can initialize the all zero tensor of shape 32 by 828 by 28 by 3. Okay, if I print this shape is 32 by 28, 28 by 3. Okay, now what will be the shape of this one? What will be the shape of this one? Just opposite 3, 28, 28, 32. Okay, any confusion?
No.
No.
Okay, so I will give you this Python file. Okay, what you can do is you can play around with this. You can check what is the shape, size, multiple things you can check with this one. Okay, so this will give you much more confidence, and you will be much more hands-on with declaring tensor PyTorch objects. Okay, now some basic arithmetical properties of PyTorch. Okay, so I declare one more. I declare a torch. Okay, PyTorch is X. Okay, this is a two-dimensional PyTorch tensor. Okay, and I am doing an arithmetic operation is R is equal to X plus 2 and print R. So all the elements in R, X got added by 2. So you can see here, that means this is operator overloading. Okay, I added just like I'm adding two arithmetic numbers. Okay, but I am actually adding a tensor with a scalar. I'm adding a tensor with a scalar, and the behavior is that the scalar gets added to all of the tensor objects. Okay, so that means this is operator overloading. The plus operator has been overloaded to behave this way. Okay, I can also write this one in this form. R2 is equal to torch dot sum x comma 2. Okay, and print R2. What happened? Expected in the range of -1 or 2. Dimension torch dot sum. Oh, this is for summing up one single. Okay, okay, okay. This is not cannot be used like that. It will add all the elements of. This is a okay. This is a reduction formula. This is not a. Uh, okay, okay, so add will be the formula. I think not add. Oops, come on. Yes. So here now if I print it, it will be the same output. Okay. So that means I can either use the operator overloading to directly do this one, or I can use the call the add method, torch add method and add to components. Okay. This also can be done. Similarly, you see here, I can have complicated arithmetic statements like the the tensor object multiplied by 2, then all of them added by 2. That is also possible. And here you see the same thing can be achieved by calling function call also. Okay. This is the same. This one, whatever you did here, you did here also, but by calling the function. Then you are creating another one tensor here. Then you are doing tensor plus tensor addition. That one we saw tensor plus scalar addition. This is tensor plus tensor addition. You can also do tensor plus tensor multiplication. Okay, tensor plus tensor multiplication. This multiplication is called Hadamard's product. Okay, this is not dot product. Okay, so this is Hadamard's product means each element will be multiplied with itself. Means a and b, a and x should be of same dimension. First of all, a of 0 0 will be multiplied by x of 0 0. A of 1 0 will be multiplied with x of 1 0, and similar. Each element will be multiplied by the other element. Okay, this is called Hadamard's product. Sometimes in the mathematical concept this comes. Okay, now this is reduction step. Reduction is that I want to get the sum of all the elements of this tensor. So this one also I'll get. So by adding all these elements of the tensor, I just got a scalar value. That is sum. This one. You can do it this way. You can do it this way also. Same thing. Okay. You can take the sum across a particular axis only. See, that means I took the sum across the x-axis only. Okay. Similarly, I can use this one. I can use this one. I can use this. Okay. So I can add sum across the axis 1, axis 0. So depending on the axis, I can get the sum. So these are reduction steps. So these are some. This is not the exhaustive list of all the operations that you can do in PyTorch, but this gives you a bootstrap. This gives you a kickstart of what you can do in PyTorch. And you might have already got an essence that this is very much similar to the behavior of declaring variables and doing operations on them like Python, right? So that is why our developers find it so easy to develop machine learning models in or deep learning models in PyTorch, because it is so much close to Python, right? So that is the reason. Okay, okay. So now this is done. So where do we move from here? Same things are written here. You can just, I already said that shape, size, and all this is written here. Okay. Okay. Now this is important. One more thing. Loading data, devices, and CUDA. Okay. It is time to start converting our NumPy code into PyTorch. Okay. So we till now have NumPy code. Let's convert that same code to PyTorch. Okay. So we had x underscore train we already had with us. in the previous class, we saw that here we have x underscore train, which was nothing but a NumPy array, right? So if you apply this function on top of it, torch.asTensor, then this NumPy array gets converted into a PyTorch tensor. Okay, so its data type will be a PyTorch tensor. If you see here, it is a torch float 64. By default, it is float 64. So if you want to save memory space, then you can do it dot float. Okay, so that means what? This one dot float. So the precision will reduce from 64 bits to 32 bits. Okay, so there will be some memory saving there. Okay, so this is the part. Torch, remember this, the torch as tensor to NumPy. Okay, so like we in NumPy we have from NumPy. Similarly, here we have as tensor. Okay, so this API, remember. So first you see here, I created a NumPy array. I created the dummy tensor. I changed the value of the dummy tensor. I printed the dummy tensor, and I got the output here. So what is written here is that this is important to note. Both as tensor and from NumPy return a tensor that shares the underlying data with the original NumPy array. Similarly to what happened when we used view in the last. If you modify the original NumPy array, you are modifying the corresponding PyTorch tensor too, and vice versa, right? So if you are using as tensor or from NumPy, this method, two methods you are using to convert a data structure from NumPy to PyTorch, then you have to keep in mind that the underlying data for both the references is the same, right? So if you are making a change in either the NumPy or the PyTorch, both of them will get affected. Okay, because this is not a copy, this is the same data structure, just wrapper of PyTorch and another was a wrapper of NumPy. Okay, but if you have to do a copy of this thing, then what to do? You do torch.tensor. Always makes a copy of the data instead of sharing the underlying data with the NumPy. Okay, so this one is the solution for that. Okay, so if you want to really make a copy and not just the original data should be shared between two references, then you call torch.tensor, not as tensor. Okay, similarly the opposite direction function name is NumPy. If you want to convert a torch tensor to a NumPy array, then you have to do dot NumPy to convert it into NumPy from torch tensor. Okay, and this one also will create a copy and not the same reference. Okay, so we have proved it here. What happened? Okay, we did it here. I already told you how do I know GPU is available. There are multiple commands which you can know GPU is available. You can also know whether GPU is what is the GPU device name, what is the number, all these things you can get. So defining your device, this is the code line for defining your device. Okay, if your torch device is there, then device is CUDA, else it is a CPU. So you always put this in your code and then do your coding as normal Python code. If your system has CUDA, then it will do all the calculations in CUDA, and if it is does not have, then it will do in CPU. Okay. Why CUDA 0? Okay. Are there others like CUDA 1, CUDA 2, and CUDA and so on? There may be, if you're lucky to have multiple GPUs in your computer. Okay. So mostly our home desktops and some things will have one GPU only. Okay, but in case you have multiple GPU system with you, then they will be numbered like this: CUDA colon 0, CUDA colon 1, CUDA colon 2, like this. Okay, and then you can, as I said, you can select a batch of data and process it CUDA 0, select another batch of data, process at CUDA 1, and that way you can do parallel processing to achieve maximum speed. Okay. Okay. So this is the code for you to know how many CUDA devices are there and what are their names. You can quickly find it out. Okay. Okay. Now this is the most important part. One of the most important part. Turn our tensor to a GPU tensor. Okay. We know what is a tensor. Okay. We know what is a tensor, what is a NumPy array, what is a tensor, how to convert between each other, what are the functions to be called to convert among each other. We know that. But how do I send my variable or tensor, PyTorch tensor variable to the CUDA device? Okay. So this is the way to send to device. Okay. So using torch as tensor, you converted. So you are using as tensor here. So tell me whether it will be a copy or it will be a same reference.
Reference.
Reference, same reference only, because as tensor is used, right? So first you converted a NumPy array to a tensor, then you are sending this tensor to the CUDA device. So this becomes a GPU tensor now. Okay. So there are three entities now to remember: NumPy array, PyTorch tensor, GPU tensor. Okay. So if you see here, when you print this one, it no more says just. So earlier this part was not shown. Okay. When you are printing, it was just telling tensor 0.7713 like this, right? Here it is given here. In the CPU, it will print like this. Okay. But in a GPU, this extra parameter will be shown to tell you that this variable resides in CUDA 0 device. Okay. So this is one extra information that it will show. So you will know that, okay, my device is in CUDA 0. Okay. Okay. So in our case, what do we do then? We have extern, ytern, right? This we got it from NumPy. Then just convert extern, ytern to torch tensor, and convert by default it is float 64, which is taking more space. So convert it into float. After converting into float, send the entire array of data or the entire tensor to device, that is GPU, and we get our train tensor, ytrain tensor, and these two are GPU tensors. These two tensors reside in the GPU memory now, not in the CPU memory. Okay. So this one you have to remember. It resides in the GPU memory, not in the CPU memory. Okay. So it is written here. What are the types and all, it is printed here. And remember here, as I said, if you remember, the reverse way of converting is of a PyTorch tensor to NumPy is dot NumPy, right? But if you apply dot NumPy function on a GPU tensor, then you will get error. Cannot convert CUDA tensor to NumPy. Use tensor.cpu to copy the tensor to host memory first. Okay, and it makes perfect sense, right? Because for NumPy, everything exists in CPU. Okay, but this variable x underscore train underscore tensor, we had sent it to the GPU memory. Now GPU memory and CPU memory is separate. They are not connected to each other, right? So a variable residing in the GPU memory, and I am applying dot NumPy function to it, it cannot be directly converted into NumPy and brought into the CPU memory. First, you have to bring that value to CPU memory. After bringing it to the CPU memory, you have to convert into NumPy. Okay, so that is, you have to remember this one. So this is the part. X train tensor, CPU, then NumPy. Okay, then only this will become to back to NumPy. Okay. 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 What distinguishes a tensor used in training data from a tensor used in trainable weight data? Can you tell me what is the difference between a training data and a trainable data? So in our y is equal to b plus wx plus epsilon, what is the training data?
X.
X and y, right? X is the
Yes, yes.
data and y is the label data, right? What is b and w?
Learnable parameter.
Meters.
Learnable parameters, right? Now, what is the core difference between these two type of data?
Once we feed and the other is they will learn by as we train.
No, the core difference is that we require the gradients of a learnable parameter. Do we require the gradient of x and y?
No.
No, because they are not learnable parameter. We only require the gradients of the learnable parameters. In this, which case, in our case, that is b and w, right? So here it is written. The latter requires the computation of gradients so that we can update their values using gradient descent. That's what the requires grad equals to 2 argument is good for. You see here it is so easy now. Okay, so what will happen here is that in here, you remember our code BW, we initialized here BW randomly, right? This one, right? We initialized b as a random value, w as a random value, and slowly I iterated through it and made the gradient descent. Now what it is telling is that you have to add one parameter here. So here it is here it was a NumPy value, np.random, right? np.random.random. But here it is no more np, it is torch.random. Okay, so torch.random is the counterpart of np.random. Same thing it does, but it creates a tensor instead of a NumPy array. Okay, so first we created a tensor of size 1 of type float, and we added an extra flag telling that whether this variable requires gradient calculation or not. If it is true, then the compiler, the library PyTorch will set a flag that b and w are learnable parameters. and then automatic gradient calculation will happen for them. Here what we did, we by hand we calculated the partial derivative formula and we coded for here, right? But should we do it for every loss function? MSC is chalo, a common loss function, we will calculate it by hand and we'll apply here. But suppose tomorrow another one custom loss function we are making. Every time we will be using note, copy and pen and solving partial derivatives and then applying here. Can it not be done automatically? Yes, it can be done automatically by applying this parameter. So whenever I say requires underscore grad is equal to true, then the compiler understands that B and W are learnable parameters and it needs to automatically calculate its gradient. Okay. So when you print it, it tells that it is a tensor with a certain property, which is requires grad true. But whereas X and Y is also a tensor, right? X underscore train, Y underscore train is also a tensor now, but they don't require gradient calculation. Okay. So this much we already saw. Now another thing is remaining to send that tensor to device, right? Because we have to do our gradient calculation in the GPU, not the CPU, right? We have to use maximum speed, and for that we have to send our data B to the device, W also to the device. Okay, but here is a problem. If you do this, it shadows the gradient parameter. Now when you print B and W, this requires grad equals to true is gone. It is in the device queued up, but grad true is not there. This ignore this one. It is telling that it is a tensor, it is the value, it is in the device queued up, but I said that gradient is true, but now it is not showing that. Because what I did, I created a tensor in the CPU, flagged it as a gradient true, and then I copied that value to this GPU. While copying to the GPU, the flag for gradient calculation got masked. Okay, the flag for gradient calculation got masked, and hence it lost its property of gradient calculation. So what is the solution for this? So the solution for this is, after sending to the device, we have to set the requiring gradients again by this formula, this function call B dot requires grad, W dot requires grad. Okay, so initially don't tell that B and W are gradient, requires a gradient. Just declare two variables B and W as a tensor, scalar tensor. Send these values to the device GPU. After sending to the device to the GPU, call this function to set the requires grad flag on. Now when you print, it says that device is this one, value is this one, it is in the CUDA device and it requires gradient calculation. Okay, so our problem is solved now. Okay. Now one more, it is telling that it is two steps we are doing. First, you are creating a device, sending it to creating a variable, sending it to the device, and again setting the flag. Can it be done in a single step? Yes, we can do it in a single step also. Okay, first create a variable, not variable, a tensor of scalar tensor, flag true, and directly you set the device inside only. No dot to device you do. You can directly set the device to true inside the rand function only. Okay, so then the rand function also takes a parameter telling where to create the random variable. Okay, So in this way, we don't need to do it 2 steps. But this is possible because RAND takes a random device. The device parameters is also taken by the random function. But suppose you have a NumPy array, okay, in your code, then what to do? You have to first change, send that device convert that into a PyTorch tensor, send that to the GPU device, CUDA device, and then set requires grad flag. Okay. Okay. Now comes AutoGrad. AutoGrad is PyTorch automatic differentiation package. Okay. Thanks to it, we do not need to worry about partial derivative, chain rule, or anything like it. See, our life has become so easy. Okay. Just by setting up that flag, we are telling to the package now, PyTorch package now, that boss, these are the 2 variables that needs learning, and hence please calculate their automatic gradients, and hence I don't care about partial derivatives and the chain rule anymore. It will do it by itself. Okay. Now you will think of how it is doing for the chain rule. Partial derivatives, it works, it is understandable, but how it works for the chain rule, that is where I will show you the graph, the torch viz graph. It also is in TensorFlow. How is the learnable parameters connected with each other, and how that partial derivative chain rule applies to each other. I'll show you the graph and you will understand from there. For now, so how do we tell PyTorch to do its thing and compute all gradients? That's the role of the backward method. It will compute gradients for all requiring gradient tensors. How did it know which one is requiring gradient? We set it by requires grad equal to true. Okay, so all those variables which has required grads equal to 2, for it gradient will be computed automatically. Okay, do you remember the starting point for computing the gradient? It was the loss, and as we computed its partial derivatives with our parameters, hence we need to invoke the backward method for corresponding Python variable loss, right? Since loss was our starting point of calculating the gradient, so we have to call the backward method on loss. Now there is an interesting thing here. You see here this one. So we have y hat, we have error, we have loss. In this part, what were we doing after calculation of the loss? We were doing gradient calculation and gradient update. These 4 lines were there, right? Instead of these 4 lines, now there is a single line called loss.backward. Okay. Now you will be thinking that I have to calculate the gradient of B and W, but here I am doing a loss on backward on loss. So how is it going to affect B grad and W grad? Because B grad and W grad is not same as loss. I am applying backward on loss, but how is B grad and W grad going to be affected? It is going to be affected because loss is a function of B and W. Loss is a function of error. Error is a function of y hat. Y hat is a function of B and W. So loss is indirectly a function of B and W. So it will create a graph. Loss is dependent on error. Error is dependent on y hat. Y hat is dependent on B and W. Okay. So when it will do dot backward, it will traverse that graph and it will find out which all variables in that graph requires grad equal to true flag on. Whichever variable it will be on, it will convert that particular, it will calculate gradient for that particular variable. So if in this case we had multiple trainable parameters B, W, C, A, B, all of that were there, and that all were used to calculate y hat, then according to the graph, the backward will calculate the gradient for all those variables, because we have set the requires grad flag to be true for all the learnable parameters. Which tensors are going to be handled by the backward applied to the loss? See, it has written B, W, y hat, error. We have set requires equals to grad for both B and W, so they are obviously included in the list. We use them to compute y hat. Yes, B and W was used to calculate y hat, so it makes to the list. Then we use y hat to compute error, which is also added to the list. So do you see a pattern? If a list tensor is in the list to use to compute another tensor, the latter will be included in the list. Tracking these dependencies is exactly the dynamic computation graph is doing. Okay, so which all tensors are dependent on learnable tensors? This tracking is done by the dynamic computation graph. And that is how the chain rule is also applied. So if you have multiple layers, imagine neural network, deep neural network, you have multiple layers, and you have set that each layer's neurons are learnable parameters, then every other layer of the later part of the neural layer value is calculated by the the following part of the neural network layer is calculated by the later part of the neural network layer. So there is a dependency, and that dependency is captured in the graph, and hence when we are applying gradient descent, automatically it will calculate gradient for the all the layers at the same time using chain rule. And you don't have to worry at all about how this is done in the background. You can do it by hand, but it is very smartly done by the AutoGrad feature of PyTorch. Okay, so you see here, error requires grad, y hat requires grad, B requires grad, W requires grad. All of them are true because B and W was used to calculate y hat was used to calculate error. So all of them has indirectly requires grad equals to true. But a y tensor and x tensor, although they are tensors, they are in the CUDA device, but still requires grad is false for them because they were not directly associated with B and W. Okay. Now, how do I know what is the gradient value? Simple, B dot grad, W dot grad. So instead of these two lines, I can now directly use B dot grad, W dot grad. Okay. It will give me the same value. So we'll come to that accumulating gradients problem. So what he is telling here is that when you print the B grad, W grad, it is telling -3, -1, which is correct. For our first loop also, we will get -3 and -1. If I loop it again, then it will become -6 and -3. If I loop it again, it will become -12 and -9. Now, why this is happening? This is happening because of a problem called accumulating gradient problem, which PyTorch by default has this one. And there is a way to circumvent this problem, to solve this problem, which one we will talk about in the next class. Okay. Now tell me any doubts that you might have. Any doubt, guys?
No.
No, sir.
Okay. So if there is no doubts, then as a homework, you have to first do the double linear regression without using PyTorch. Okay. Then the same double linear regression with PyTorch. Okay. And prove that and show me what all are the learnable parameters there and how they are affecting each other, which is dependent on whom and how they are affecting each other. How is the chain rule achieved by the autograd feature of PyTorch? Possible?
Okay, sir. We'll try.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, then I will upload this class and go through this class and take notes. Please take notes. That is very, very important. And so if you have, so what we will do is every day, first half an hour we will keep for doubt clearance. Then next 1 hour, 30 minutes we will study. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, guys. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
sir.
sir.